Welcome to our panel on Counterintelligence Provocation 2016 here at the Left Forum. Okay, I'm going to start here with this slide of Occupy. Because in this slide you'll see it says, what is our one demand? This was the first iconic slide that they made to advertise the Occupy movement. So this is, I guess, where I started my journey into what counterintelligence provocation was. So I watched this movement unravel because of trained agents, propaganda that was billionaire funded coming out of the foundations. This all put tactical pressure on the movement for the purpose of destruction, neutralization, confusion, and misguiding, with the ultimate goal to be that the demands, whatever our original demand was going to be, the demands that were going to come out of Occupy and the message was going to be destroyed, and also to make the activists look as cartoonish and unappealing to the American public as they possibly could be. This is the same, this is the same sort of propaganda, and I want you to notice this now because you see it, the propaganda that's going on in service of the Trump cartel. The media, through twists in editing and other provocations, are trying, they have the goal to make the left and Bernie supporters as unappealing to the American public as possible. So this is more neo-McCarthyite propaganda happening. The work involved to destroy the Occupy movement involved mass psychological operations stemming back to the Stasi and before, for manipulating crowds. And this was all, and again, this is funded by billionaire foundations. Wall Street, more importantly, remember it's been funded by Wall Street, and the intelligence community all came together, and in this case, activists didn't stand a chance. In the time that I was at the Occupy camps, I started in New York, and then I ended the time at Occupy in LA. I saw the agenda go from coherent to incoherent. We, in fact, had started with one demand, which I believe would have been the 1% Wall Street sales tax. A gentleman named Kali Lassen, who worked at Adbusters when this first poster was made, he was part of that original group credited with making this iconic poster. Kali Lassen went on TV and said that we were all in the process of coming up with what our one demand should be. And Kali said on Fox News, we're coming to the agreement, and I also think it should be the 1% Wall Street sales tax. And you'll notice on this poster, I don't have a laser pointer, do I? Where is it? It's on this? Oh, the red button. You'll notice right here, it says, what is our one demand? And like I said, this was the iconic poster. This is the poster that set it off. And right at the top, why would it say, what is our one demand? We sure lost sight of that, I would say. We so much lost sight of that shortly, within a couple weeks, it became this. If we had, back to the idea of the 1% Wall Street sales tax for a second, if at that time we had all come together behind one demand, all that energy at Occupy had come together for one demand, it is quite possible that we could have achieved our goal. And that would have been huge. It would have injected trillions of dollars into the American economy. It would have curbed high-speed speculation. And it would have gone a long way to re-tilt this playing field that's gone in the last 30 years from production and speculation, now way in favor of speculators are up here and production down here. At least this 1% Wall Street sales tax could have brought it a little more like this. But instead, the psychological operations, the intelligence community, the billionaire foundations came in, and this is COINTELPRO 2016, and this is where we're going to start. So Occupy everything. There they are, got the black bloc anarchists, Occupy Everything. It had spread out, it gets to the Bay Area at this point. This all happened very quickly. After Occupy Everything, or during Occupy Everything, we had this psychological operation. Wake up, occupy your mind. The revolution begins within. Of course, this is the DMT crowd, the psychedelic crowd, that if you just fix yourself, if you just experience other dimensions, the world's going to get fixed. Wall Street's magically going to disappear if you just take some psychedelics in the jungle. They tried that with LSD in the 60s. It didn't work. In fact, the banks only got stronger. So occupy your mind. Agent provocateurs. These are your traditional agent provocateurs. I don't need to go that much into them because there's going to be many talks on your typical anarchist. But police, since 19th century France or 20th century Russia have always thrown agent provocateurs into the crowd in order to incite violence. Okay? Then things get violent. And here's the result of things getting violent. You have police brutality. And this all happened very quickly within a week or two. And there was rumors at the time, well, there's no rumors, there was proof at the time that people like Jamie Dimon were paying the police force to go in and rough up the protesters. And this way, all the attention, again, steered off the banks, steered way away from the demand at this point. We're way far away from that demand ever existing again. And I've been in this protest. And all of the attention is on police brutality, because when people are beaten right in front of you, your attention goes there and you lose sight of the larger economic purpose, the goal, the message why you were there in the first place. Then we had the human mic. And in a way, to me, this was the beginning of the end, because this was a tactic that was used before. I've seen it pushed and encouraged. It was pushed and encouraged by the foundations and provocateurs. And I knew that there was just something not right. But if you expressed, at that time, the groupthink was so strong that there were certain people that were experts in certain areas, and they needed a chance to explain, like an economic program, like people who are experts in this field that could have been on our side. They were told to shut up, and nobody is better than anyone else. So I just saw at this point that it was becoming chaos, and like I said, the groupthink was too strong, and the intended psychological operation was well in effect. And during the course of the during the course of the Occupy days, I moved from New York City, disillusioned, to LA, visited the LA Occupy, and when I got there, the entire thing at that point was about police brutality. The first day that I got to Occupy LA, I said, well, what's on the agenda? And the agenda was, we are going to march in solidarity with New York City's police brutality, even though that wasn't at the time even happening there. And I said, well, what about the bankers? And it was like a big, huh? Well, we got to focus on police brutality because that's what's happening right now. Okay. So I remember, I experienced this as a big heartbreak. This was a big demoralization. This was a marker in my life. This was a crossroads. I remember leaving that last Occupy camp downtown Los Angeles, and instead of taking the bus back to my apartment, which was about 10 miles away, I walked home, and I thought to myself, and I'm sure this happened to many of you, because I'm sure many of you were heartbroken. I just kept thinking, well, what do we do next? I could see that it was over. I just knew that was the nail in the coffin when I got to Occupy LA. I was like, this is over. What do we do next? And I walked and I thought and I walked and I thought. And the best answer I could come up with was, we have to get back to Callie Lassen's one demand. And somehow, maybe we could re-spark this movement with the what is our one demand. I didn't know how to do that myself, but over the next few months, I formed a political party to run a candidate for mayor of New York called the Tax Wall Street Party. And originally, this party was a party based on just that one demand. And we were going to run people for office because I thought, at least if we run people for office, we can get these crowds behind these people, but the person who's running can articulate and lead a program, can articulate this demand and lead it, while the supporters don't tear them down with the human mic, but are supporting the demand. Sort of switch it around, I thought. But I didn't have any other platform point except for Tax Wall Street. Then I met Webster Tarpley, and it became a full economic recovery program. Webster had written out 5 points to end the economic depression, and he explained everyone to me, and I thought they were all equally necessary. I think nationalizing the Fed is even more necessary, but it was still called Tax Wall Street Party, but they're both equal, I would say. But so now there's a 5-point economic plan. You can read that plan at taxwallstreetparty.us. Okay, so my experience on the ground witnessing COINTEL work to distract a movement, to misguide it, to shatter it, to fragment it, and to turn it away from bankers didn't prepare me at all, because this is talk on counterintelligence, for what I experienced leading a movement. These are two totally different things. So if you're leading something that it's a threat, Occupy was threatening in the beginning. They ended up neutralizing it. But if you're leading something that is a threat to bankers or is threatening to whatever establishment that they see as threatening, you are going to experience professional elicitation. You're going to be given you're going to be assigned a professional elicitor. They are going to make, this elicitor is going to make a personality profile. They're going to befriend you. I was elicited for about a period of a year and didn't know it. They're going to make a personality profile. One of the first things they're looking for are arrestable offenses. Do you have any arrestable offenses that you're admitting to in these phone conversations? Or can they, in fact, push you into getting arrested? Can they suggest something? I had suggestions of filling out paperwork that would be illegal. Oh, just send me all your information. I'll fill out the paperwork for you. I later looked on the bottom. It says, if somebody else fills out this paperwork, it's a $30,000 fine. I never let the person do that. I said, no, I don't feel comfortable. But they're pushing you toward arrestable offenses if you don't have any. And they're making a personality profile that can later be used against you if you move higher. Doesn't come all at once. It's like, we're not going to squash you right now, but you want to run for office? We have that. So they also target new candidates, because I run candidates for political office. Our political party does. And they go and elicit new candidates that come out of nowhere. And they elicit them early, so that if the candidate begins to rise in the poll, I was speaking to a candidate about this the other night. If they begin to rise in the poll, or they are making headway, it looks like there's a chance of winning, they have stuff to pull out on them. They have to have this information on us. So you will be assigned a professional elicitor. Okay, they're going to map your strengths and weaknesses. They're going to find out how they can effectively disrupt your campaigns. And they're going to find out dirt about you. And for when you're running for office. But I think much more is they're going to find out how they can disrupt campaigns. They're going to find out who has criminal energy against you, who doesn't like you. Especially in groups of activism, people have feelings about other people in the group, and they'll exploit strengths and weaknesses. They'll exploit your personal strengths and weaknesses. Maybe you have a disease. Maybe you have an anxiety disorder. Maybe you have some sort of physiological problem or a health problem. They'll push buttons in that direction. Maybe I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, but if you have something that is a weakness, they'll push on it until you have a nervous breakdown, until you're exhausted by it. Okay. And you don't trust me about FBI elicitation? Go to FBI.gov. So this is FBI.gov. This is the FBI's own website. This is for you to look at later if you want and read carefully. It's quite fascinating because it shows you how somebody can elicit you. So if you think, it only happened to that girl, it's not going to happen to me, it's impossible it's nearly impossible to detect. But I'll teach you some tricks, but it's pretty impossible to detect, okay? So this brochure says it's an introduction to elicitation and elicitation techniques. Understanding the techniques and the threat may help you detect and deflect elicitation attempts. This is, like I said, right on the FBI's own website. All you have to do is put in FBI.gov, elicitation techniques. The website address, if you want to write it, I think I put it at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, I did. You can put that. Elicitation, I'm gonna talk about this for a couple seconds because it's important. Elicitation is a technique used to discreetly gather information. It is a conversation with a specific purpose, collect information that is not readily available, and do so without raising suspicion. These people are trained, they are professional elicitors. So without raising suspicion that specific facts are being sought, it is usually non-threatening, easy to disguise, deniable, and effective. The conversation can be in person, over the phone, or in writing, and conducted by a skilled elicitor will appear to be normal or social or professional conversation. A person may never realize that she is the target of elicitation or that she provided meaningful information. So here are some highlights from this slide because I know they're hard to see. The strategic use of conversation to extract information from people without giving them the feeling they are being interrogated. Is this too much for me to read, or is this interesting to you guys? Should I? Okay. Elicitation attempts can be simple and sometimes obvious. If they are obvious, it is easier to detect and deflect. On the other hand, elicitation may be imaginative, persistent, involving extensive planning, and may co-employ co-conspirators. Okay? People they ask to find out more information about you. They befriend your friends, things like that. Elicitors may use a cover story to account for the conversation topic and why they ask certain topics. Elicitors may collect information about you or your colleagues that could facilitate future targeting attempts. Elicitation can occur anywhere, at social gatherings, at conferences, over the phone, on the street, blah, blah. Okay, elicitation is not rare. I don't know, it's not on the slide anymore, the FBI says, and all bold. Why it works. People have a desire to be polite, helpful. People have a desire to gossip. People have a tendency to want to correct others. So an elicitor is say, I think that this wall is purple, and you go, no, it's white. You see what they misdirect you, so there's a bunch of tricks. Here are some of the big ones. Flattery. This is especially what was used in our organization, flattery. Telling one activist they were the greatest since Abraham Lincoln, telling another activist they were the greatest since George Washington, and too much, things that were too over the top. I brought a lot of my evidence to an intelligence officer, and they read through some of the stuff I presented, and they said, people don't write like this. This is somebody, I know you think you're great. I know you think you're great. We all think we're great, but, you know. So good, they are good listeners. They're always there. They're never hot. They're never cold. They're never tired. They are always available, and they listen. And I like to talk, and so a good listener is something I like. Mutual interest. Oh, mutual interest is a big one. You're not going to have somebody just come off the street doing this and say, hey, you know, I want to know everything about you. It's going to be, they're going to assign a person to you that has your #1 interest. So I don't want to go into details, but the person that elicited me was interested in precisely what we're doing and an expert in precisely what we're doing with running candidates and whatnot. Okay. Okay. After professional elicitation and the elicitor has defined personal weakness and the nature of personal relationships, they will begin to divide and conquer. They're going to start to destroy. First, they make a report. That could take a long time, that process. That could take a year. That could take 2 years. They get contracts as long as they need to sufficiently gather enough information on many layers. Once they have this information, then starts the process of destruction. The divide and conquer. That's basically the thesis of how third parties or organizations split up is because of infighting. There's been a lot of organizations, and I want to warn everybody here, that it's a shame that could have done a lot of good that were split up because of personal infighting, jealousy, vendettas, that we are not sure would have been there necessarily if not for being stoked, promoted, harvested, you know? So, okay. So this elicitor then, pretending to be a confidant, meanwhile was conscripting a few of the people in the group who wanted to destroy the group, change direction, and run it their way. So after your elicitation, the elicitor begins to use, I'm just going to use that word, crazy people, or otherwise known as a NARG group, a NARG network. This is a collection of individuals that are disgruntled about something. Maybe they weren't disgruntled before the elicitor put some things in their head. Maybe they were always disgruntled. You're always going to have a few in every group. What that person then does is organize these people. Organize them, get them paranoid, put propaganda in their head, wind them up, say, you're the greatest, she's bad, he's bad, you have never been given enough respect in your life. You could have been, I'm going to keep naming presidents, you could have been Martin Luther King, you could have been Malcolm X, you could have been Kennedy. If it weren't for that girl or those groups, you're the one who's the star, and you've got to take her down. And only if you do take that person down, you will see your success shoot to the stars. And they also form a separate organization. It's called a Delphic organization. It's meant to look and mirror. It's a mirror of the organization you're currently in without any of the substance. I know Webster Tarpley will go into this. It's from Frank Kitsen's Gangs and Counter Gangs. The reason they need to set up this other organization is so that as the officer now winds people up, so you've got the elicitor who doubles as an officer, or the elicitor just reports to an officer who does the winding up. There's a few ways it works. But as these people are, they're trying to create a place where they can siphon the people out. So they get one person wound up, or the person they can get stirred up. Oh, don't worry about it. There's this organization over here, and it's much better. And studies show that people won't leave an organization unless they have some place that seems equal to go to, where they'll also have like-minded friends who are sort of at least doing the same thing. And especially if they're embraced into that environment, embraced by gossip, meaning you go to that, if they have that other organization to go to and it says, I know, what you've been through over there is terrible, and we think you are, start naming, give me a name of a great historical figure. Just yell one out. Name anything, you yell it out. Who?
Seward, John Seward.
Yeah, you're John Seward. We were waiting for you the whole time. Come over to our organization. Keep naming any. That's what they do. It's based on flattery. It works. Now, I'm going to talk to you for a second, and I think it's important. It might seem silly, but it's not, because crazy people have the power to disrupt and destroy organizations, and they're more dangerous than you think they are, because they know not what they do, and they're easily manipulated. So I want to talk a little bit about this. Ego strength. What you have to look for in an organization, what the ego strength is of your members. Successful organizations that last and have the ability to build and grow and eventually have impact are a collection of people with ego strength. You want to ask yourself if the activists surrounding you have had some success or been challenged in some way in the real world. And I don't mean that in a superficial sense. They don't have to be, you know, a rock star or an astronaut. I'm talking about just, do they feel good about themselves? Have they been challenged? Do they have some family connections? Do they have a loving marriage? If they're not married, do they have a nice relationship that you notice with their girlfriends? Do they have friends? Or are these people sort of isolated and angry? The reason is because people, like I said, who have weak egos, they are the most easily manipulated by an agent or an officer to turn against your organization for their own weak ego gratification. Okay? So if somebody tells them they're special, they'll turn on everybody else. And they're never going to get enough of being told they're special from the people within your organization, because supposedly your organization is supposed to be there to do work. It's not a mutual praise association, even though we praise each other based on what our accomplishments are and we provide backbone and support. What they don't want that type of support. They want, oh, we love you, this mushy, sort of superficial support. Okay, the old metaphor of the person, you know, who's in their basements that we always hear, the person living in their basement applies here, but you got to put that in context. This is complicated. I mean, if a person's in their basement because they're writing the next great American novel, or they're saving up to get their own place, and you've talked to them and you met their family, that's fine. I'm talking about people who are isolated and angry and haven't really left. So no one trait is conclusive. Do they exhibit a member of being society in some way? Are they proud of themselves? Do they have something to lose by acting in a careless way? Do they use their real names on social media? Are they using sock puppet accounts to attack you? But does that person themselves, even if they are using their real name, have something to lose? Meaning a job or their reputation? Anyway. So people who have these attachments in the real world are not easily manipulated. Do they have a mental tolerance for contradictions, changes in strategy? Because as circumstances change, so will the direction of your group. This is true in wartime as any other time. Many generals have said when circumstances changed, they took different direction. That's the nature. And believe me, you are in battle. Not fighting with swords, but you aren't swords and guns, but you are in a battle when you are going up against finance oligarchy. This is the biggest battle of our time. So you've got to change strategy all the time. Are they, do they have a mental tolerance for contradictions, changes in strategy, because circumstances change? And the last thing I wanted to spend my time protesting this year was fascist Donald Trump. But along he came. So we had to change course, and we had to say, this is a priority. We have to do this. Are they fixated on things being in their own way? If so, can they leave and start? If so, they can leave and start their own thing. That's fine. But if they don't leave, if they continue to harass, this is counterintelligence provocation. And whether they know it or not, the officer at the top is not encouraging them to start another successful organization, because the goal of these services is not to have a bunch of successful organizations. They don't say, hey, you know what, start your own successful organization and leave those guys alone. The goal is destroy them. You know, you can have your little organization to bring people over. The whole time the guy's knowing it's not going to go anywhere while you destroy them, but it's never a clean break, okay? I'm not going to go through this slide completely, but this is titled Petty Bourgeois Ego Trippers. This is a very, very, very big thing in activist organizing. There's going to be people who are more interested in themselves, becoming famous for this in and of itself. These types of things, it's all well and good to become famous because you're active. That's fine. I hope everybody becomes famous because they're active, because we want you guys on television. But just for the fame of itself, does everything come back to what I feel and what I want, and you hurt me and you did this? Or is it about the goal of the organization? Are you there fighting bankers? Is the question. Do they seem too interested in secretarial work or exhibit gatekeeping behavior? So this is a very important one. Like that, do they want to take the minutes of the meeting so they can manipulate the minutes to suit their own agenda? When you take minutes in a meeting, you can then say, oh, this is what really says. It changes history. That's a way of rewriting history. And do they want back-end access, passwords, so they can steal contacts, things like that? Look for that. These are a lot of words here, but you want your activists to be up in this category where the red arrow is going up. These are the qualities. You would rather be surrounded by 2 people with these categories, you can get more done, than a million like this, because a million like this might be good for 1 march, but this is going nowhere. This is not going to build, it's not going to grow. So if you're going to start an activist organization, find 2 people with these qualities. You can read them, I'll go through a few. Communicating clearly, asking for help, accepting differences, encouraging, complimenting, following directions, participating equally, resolving conflicts, loyalty, toughness, self-discipline, sharing materials, sharing intel, task-oriented, taking risks, patience, staying on the team, centralized thinking, mindful, flexibility, wisdom, unity, boldness, courage, resourcefulness, security. Are they internally secure with themselves and external security? Are there some agents out there coming? Does that person smell like they're an agent coming to get us? Internal and external security. Self-control, creativity, discernment, discretion, gratefulness to each other, and service. You're here to do service. You're doing a service to humanity. That's what activism is. You're providing a service for humanity. Then down here, you could pause the slide if this is a video, but I'm not going to go through them. But lying, whining, revenge, flattery, bitterness, insolence, coveting intel, complaining, blah, 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 implacability, self-pity. Oh, everybody's mean to me all the time. Excuse-making, I couldn't get it done. Self-righteousness. Oh, that person did this one, I wouldn't have done that. Plotting, treason. Treason applies in activist organizations too. We are all revolutionary combat leaders in real activist organizations. Treason applies. Are you taking, in all the definition of treason, are you taking information to the enemy? Are you destroying your group in service of the enemy? Okay. How to spot an agent. I'm going to take this one step further in a way you may not be able to spot an agent. I'm going to try to get through this quickly. I know we're tight for time, but you may not be able to spot an agent. These are the people who have been selected for their ability to blend and not draw attention. They have months and years of intensive training in the fine details of avoiding suspicion and detection, and their livelihoods depend on being invisible. I read through hundreds of accounts from different MI6, CIA, FBI documents, and what they're looking for is to find people who are actually quite bland. They're looking for bland people who fit in and are undetectable. Okay. So I talked to you about a case officer. A case officer gives the contract to an elicitor to gather the information. Then they start to conscript agents. Agents could be anything from, agents are witting or unwitting. They could be people who, they're just basically, they're willing, they could be willing or unwilling, that's the other thing. An agent can be willing or unwilling, witting or unwitting, still makes them an agent. They're people, they're the disruptors who can't wait to gossip about you to an officer. See, they want to say, I know about this person, I know, you know, that kind of stuff. Okay, I've gone through a lot of these notes, I'm skipping ahead. Okay, so we've got this woman. So this is a very famous spy. I'm going to show you 3 famous spies. Melita Norwood, codenamed Ola, was prized in Moscow. Passed on British top nuclear secrets for 35 years. Neighbors believe she was a charming, eccentric old lady. These are famous cases I'm going to go through, but I poured through hundreds of files of ex-American agents and spies. And the people who were in COINTEL in the 60s and 70s who invaded the movements. A gentleman who was a victim of COINTEL in the 70s told me the scariest thing when he walked into a room of officers, everybody sitting there was a little old lady. These 2 are famous. Bob Lambert, look up this movie, Confessions of an Undercover Cop. It's on YouTube, it's a must watch. What's interesting about this is it gives you the dynamic, the internal dynamic of what it's like to be one of these people. This guy was 7 years in the field, and he began a physical love relationship with one of the environmental activists. He was, from 2001 to 2009, he was an activist in 23 countries. They do a thing called lifting and shifting. Lifting and shifting. They go to your organization when it starts to get a little hairy, they lift and they find something else you were working with, alongside some other project that was an offshoot, they'll lift over there. So this talks about the emotions and just what it is, and it's almost unbelievable that they sent him in just to live with these activists 7 years, and what his feelings about that were. He says he lived a schizophrenic existence, and nobody could tell. You can't tell. This book is something I've been reading. Essentially, it documents 3 points. This book is from the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services, Undercover Operations and Informant Handling. It talks about infiltration. Agents and informers did not merely spy on political activists. Their main function was to discredit and disrupt. I highlighted that, okay? Other forms of deception, the FBI and police also waged psychological warfare from the outside through bogus publications. We've had that, a magazine that was made in our name, forged correspondence. You wouldn't even know if things were written by you or said, you know, anonymous letters, telephone calls, and similar forms of deceit to take down somebody in the group. Harassment, intimidation, then the 3rd level that it goes all the way up to is harassment, intimidation, and violence. Eviction, job loss, break-ins, vandalism, grand jury subpoenas, false arrests, frame-ups, physical violence, instigated or directly employed in an effort to frighten activists and disrupt their movements. It keeps coming back to this word, disruption and neutralization. That's the goal. Government agents either concealed their involvement or fabricated a legal context. And in the case, let's not forget, of the Black and American movements, there were outright assassinations. These are on record, including, I won't go into all of them. You can look that up in the early COINTEL. But today, it is rare that you hear about political assassinations, even though they still do occur. But they have a much more sophisticated apparatus that they've honed over the years. Like I said, back to the Stasi, that the no-touch torture, and it's basically they found more success in disrupting and wearing down a movement and making the activists seem unappealing to the American public. Here it is. COINTEL wants to distort the public's view of a radical group. guys like this will jump in here and burn the American flag. No American likes that, you know? So they want to isolate these radical groups and help them to legitimize open public repression. Okay, that's about it. In conclusion, I live in Washington, D.C. now, and since the Bush administration created the Department of Homeland Security in response to 9/11, it's ballooned. In my neighborhood alone, I have 5 to 10 boutique intelligence services. So when people say it comes from the federal government, that worries me, because a lot of people just will say, the CIA is after me, or the FBI is after me. And what's happening now with the activist groups is there are boutique organizations that are paid on a contract basis from Wall Street money. And there are thousands of these people employed. Somewhere in my notes I have the exact statistic, but you could go to Homeland Security's website, just see how many are in Homeland Security. But most of those people really are focused on things like border security and that kind of stuff. Where you get the real insidious, nefarious stuff toward your typical left forum activist or your small activist organizations, that's Wall Street paying out a certain amount of money to boutique organizations to harass you, to send troll accounts after your organization. And you should not think in any way that there's a tendency amongst people to think, oh, why me, or I wouldn't be on this list, or they wouldn't even bother with left-wing organizations. But I urge you to watch that Confessions of an Undercover Cop, because they're in everything from environmental groups to different types of church groups. There are thousands and thousands employed, and we're one of a handful, our group, of political parties in the entire United States that runs candidates for federal office, and the name of our party is the Tax Wall Street Party. So if you think we're not on their radar, we 100% are. And they are just going to try to continue to destroy the stuff we start, so gets us demoralized. But we will get strong, we will get clear. You want to be clear, you want to have clear communication. You want to always be talking with your fellow activists. If you're upset, don't hold resentments. Get things out in the open. Become very much, I don't want to say like a family, because some people have dysfunctional families, and I find our organization more functional than any family I've ever been a part of. But you want to be as open and clear as possible. And if you smell something wrong, tell each other. Maybe the leaders of your organization, tell each other, so that doesn't mean you're a gossip. You're in the service of security. And just know that don't be paranoid to the point where you don't take action, but know that if you may be in a position where you're being elicited. And so meet your friends in person. I was elicited for a year by somebody I never met in person. So meet your friends in person, get to know them, and you'll figure it out. But this is happening, and I cannot tell you, I don't know the scope, because it's hard to know, because this stuff is all done covertly, of how much they've destroyed in America of progress organizations, but we're not going to let it take us down. Thank you.